welcome to Shoot the Projectionist, the Sparks That Tell a Story episode. I'm Eddie Hardy.
And I'm Miranda Sandi.
Joining us today
is Sam Petersen.
Sam, this is 3 episodes in a row for you.
I'm so honored. I don't know what I did to deserve my spot back here, but I'll gladly take it.
Back to back to back. Today we're going to be talking about The Get Down, Netflix original series, which was co-created by Baz Luhrmann and Stephen Adly Guirgis. I'm guessing, very obviously guessing that's
very exotic.
How his last name would be pronounced. He was previously known, I at least had read his name before. He did a play that Chris Rock starred in a few years ago that was called The Motherfucker with the Hat. And nice. I read several articles in the New York Times where they tried to be very polite about this play while never ever being able to say its title.
We enjoyed the Chris Rock of it.
Chris Rock wore a hat. And then, of course, Baz Luhrmann.
Yes.
Does he wear hats? Miranda, you're my Baz Luhrmann expert.
Oh, good Lord. I don't know. I've never seen the man as far as I know.
Does he wear hats? That's all America wants to know.
He could wear a hat. It might be a motherfucking hat. I don't know.
But you love some of his movies, or at least I know you love one of his movies very hard.
I love Strictly Ballroom with all my heart and soul.
Yeah.
And I really did really like
okay.
Romeo and Juliet.
Mm-hmm.
But,
sure.
Moulin Rouge can suck it.
Oh, them's fighting words.
Oh, I will fight and we will cut scenes and it won't know if we ever fought at all.
No, you don't have to fight me. I don't have strong feelings about Moulin Rouge.
So, yeah.
Or do you have strong feelings about Baz Luhrmann in general?
No. And really, I feel like the first time I and maybe other people are connecting the dots with him. I feel like I should have before now, but something about this project has finally forced me to go back and be like, oh, this is the guy that did this, and this.
Interesting.
And that's the same guy. Like, I haven't put that together yet.
It's actually really interesting to have been aware of just a few movies he's done. He may have done 20. I don't know. I'm only aware of the few. Pardon me. And Strictly Ballroom is so kind of small, sleeper. You're kind of got to be willing to watch a movie about ballroom dancing to appreciate how sweet and awesome this movie is. But then you go to Romeo and Juliet, and then you kind of got to be into Shakespeare and be willing to watch Leonardo DiCaprio like squeak around the screen, or at least watch John Leguizamo be the best freaking Prince of Cats there was.
I was a Mercutio fan. Nice.
Yeah.
And then Moulin Rouge.
He was the guy who played in Lost after that, right?
No.
Who am I thinking of?
No.
Did
he?
I'm not a Lost
fan. No, he was Michael. He was
Yeah.
Michael. Yes.
Yeah.
I had a friend who confused him with Ruby Rod from Fifth Element, which was bad. And then go to Moulin Rouge, which is just like Baz Luhrmann was doing so much crack that he forgot what pictures look like.
Yeah, there have been some other movies before and inside and out of all those other ones, but they all have in common musicals that are a bit garish and overdone.
Fantastical, I'd say.
While at the same time trying to be really, really narrative and present the musical element in a different way. So that, because when you say, oh, well, there are musicals that are super overdone and garish, it's like, yeah, it's a musical, bro.
Yeah.
But the thing is that he's trying to make movies that are taken seriously as dramas, or not necessarily taken seriously, but received as narrative dramas that have musical elements rather than musicals in general. And he's a named director. And I feel the reason why I asked what you guys thought of him is because that's the baggage that people are bringing to The Get Down on Netflix.
And I do want to say, having watched The Get Down, that the color of the set and the depth of the detail of the set is still very much present. And it's the first thing that I remember about Romeo and Juliet is the way that the environment he set up was like did a set designer for a stage proud, because you've only got so much room in which to tell your audience where you are and how you should feel about it. And he did that, putting frames within the shot and little details and, names of Sword 9.0 and stuff like that. And he brought that to the Get Down. Graffiti everywhere, people's dress, the way they're interacting.
Also, the speed of the cuts in that first episode. The only one that's actually directed by Baz Luhrmann out of the 6 that make up what they're calling the first half of the first season, breaking typical Netflix convention of putting out an entire season. They put out what they're saying is the first half of a season. The only one that's actually directed by Luhrmann is that first episode, which is twice as long as any of the others, and a lot more, I was going to say cartoony, but I'll be graceful instead and say
childish. No.
Vibrant.
I will say that another director that I was getting into when I was starting to pay attention to Baz Luhrmann was Julie Taymor. And she did Across the Universe, also garish, also overdone, also a musical, also very artistic and visually striking, as I'm sure many DVD covers have said. But that's what that first episode reminded me of, is the very bright splash of either personality or color or both, to really try to pull you in.
And she did Titus Andronicus, which is another pretty visual take on Shakespeare. And I think they will have roots in the stage too.
Yeah, and so that's kind of what I saw in the first episode, is this attempt to be very vibrant and compelling, so that you want to find out. And I mean, the way they use graffiti, the way they use the wall art, like it's impossible not to have some scenes just saturated with color and
the subject
larger-than-life
of
art.
The Get Down is the birth of hip hop music. It's 1977. It's the South Bronx. It's a story that has been told over and over, at least on record, and in a few other contexts. A book that I would recommend checking out just as like good groundwork for the subject matter that we're dealing with here is actually a series of graphic novels by a guy named Ed Piskor, Piskor. Ed, that
Piskor
is this guy's name. Hip Hop Family Tree. They just put out a 3rd edition, which I haven't actually been able to check out, but the first 2 are great. They're done in a style that is super throwback. It looks like maybe it's in a Sunday comic section, or maybe an old comic from the 70s that's moldered.
Right next to Marmaduke.
Yeah, it looks like it was printed on cheap paper, or it was a comic that has been sitting around since then, and it's drawn in that style, but it is a straight history of hip hop. And even in the third one, he's only up to like Run DMC. So it's pretty minute in its detail, and what we're dealing with in The Get Down is such a specific representation of a moment. They're not trying, it doesn't seem to me, to tell a grand tale of epic scope unless this thing is going to have like 100 more episodes. In the course of those 6, we're like a couple of days later.
Yeah.
And they are being so specific about the exact cultural moment that they're representing.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it seems like all of the elements of the time and place are creating an effect. And I think one of the first things that actually when I was rewatching this with my boyfriend, he kept saying, "Man, wherever they're filming must be really hot." And I was like, no, actually, it's the summer, the hottest summer that, New York has ever seen.
Yes.
Like, they haven't gotten to that detail in the show yet,
The
but
blackout.
I'm going to spoil it for you. It's really, really fucking hot there right now.
All
Spoiler,
the fires.
the 70s.
Summer 1977. It is the hottest summer on record. It is the year of the blackout. It is the year of the birth of punk rock. It's like, it's fucking Son of Sam is running around killing people that year.
I was wondering about that.
That is all happening. Like, this is a very notable moment in time.
Are really trying to capture that. I mean, once he pointed that out, I couldn't stop noticing. Even in like the night shots, you can see heavy amounts of sweat glistening on these kids. Like something even as small as the fact that it is one of the hottest summers New York had ever seen. That still is important enough to play a part in this story and needs to be represented in every aspect.
It's actually very interesting because I was wondering where this was sort of in the time scale of Son of Sam, because when I think about cinematic representations of a very hot summer in New York, that's one of the most common ones, the newspaper headline says, Son of Sam strikes again, blah, blah, blah. And I didn't see that as present in this show. Mm-hmm. And I think that is a very interesting element of how, I don't know if this is true, but it seems like they did a lot to isolate this moment, that they were representing from all of that other stuff. Like, none of them are afraid of the Son of Sam. And that's not what they're talking about. That this is not of concern to them. What they're concerned with is this neighborhood stuff, this music stuff, this stuff that's going on for them. And I think it's kind of an interesting commentary to me about the Black and Latino neighborhood versus the white neighborhoods. Like, the white neighborhoods are worried about getting broken into and strangled, and these kids are, number one, trying not to get fucking killed, and number two, having this wonderful moment of artistic discovery. I just thought it was really interesting.
They look across at Manhattan as you do when you live anywhere else in New York, and the conversation that gets had of, why go to Manhattan? We got everything they got here, except for they don't have this view, is one that anyone who's lived in New York has heard somebody say as they're standing on a rooftop in Brooklyn or whatever your version of that is. And so I think that they're going to give us more of that in the second half of the season, because the whole trajectory of the first half is we're here and we're thinking about going there. Mm-hmm. So the second half of the season is going to be probably going there. Mm-hmm. But let's talk about some of the characters. All right. So Romeo and Juliet, same thing. Same thing still going on. It's maybe filtered through West Side Story, but it's still the same thing. You have Zeke and Mylene, and they are not from houses equal in dignity, but they are from the same neighborhood.
But what if instead of just being hopelessly in love, Juliet had a dream that actually came before?
Oh, so it's a nice
as small
feminist update.
Yeah. Well, to start with Zeke, though, I think one of the first things that I really noticed and got in touch with was that in an age where we're really trying to push the idea of sensitivity on young men in a positive way of like, it's okay to have feelings. It's really refreshing to actually have a show that is like, look at young men have been sensitive since the 70s.
At least.
We're, this isn't even something that we invented. We have young men who could be your role models.
Right,
still.
and we can talk about Dizzy, played by Jaden Smith, a little bit later as being part of that trajectory. Also, the other main male character, the DJ to Zeke's MC, is a young man by the name of Shaolin Fantastic, the lady killing romantic, and much of what this slick little dude says and does is very misogynist.
Yeah. And that actor, I actually got familiar with just a couple of months ago from the movie Dope.
Yeah.
Have you seen that? An amazing movie, independent film where, interestingly enough, he plays a young man who's obsessed with 90s hip hop. Mm-hmm. And so I don't know if somebody saw that and was like, this is the perfect kid.
That was a big breakout indie movie, and I don't know what the timeline is, but I imagine that it made sense to cast that kid. He's His name is Shamik Moon or Moore. Depends on how I read my own handwriting. Probably Moore. I'm going Shamik Moore.
Yeah.
I've never heard his name spoken aloud, so we'll give my pronunciation a break. But he's something to see. And especially in that first Baz Luhrmann directed pilot, he's presented as a superhero. You see parts of him in close-up, very sexualized as well. He does say things that are misogynist, but he's also presented in a very sexualized way and actually pimps himself out a little bit to the gangster character who, in another feminist gesture in The Get Down, is a woman. Mm-hmm. Annie?
Fat Annie.
Fat Annie. Okay, maybe not that feminist.
But she is a boss.
Yeah, she is, and she takes advantage of him in one of two scenes, the least explicit of the two, where women force themselves on men in a power play in The Get Down.
Which is also another sort of refreshing thing to see that's happening in reality that we don't often touch upon in television, is that now the more women we see in positions of power who are no less subject to taking advantage of people. It's a topic I hear coming from young men, actually specifically often more from young gay men, of being like, I have had to do things for women in power that I did not feel comfortable with and would rather not talk about.
Maybe the straight men aren't talking about it.
Yeah, because it's supposed to be something you're proud of, right? If a chick wants to take advantage of
so many
you.
sitcom plots have told us, if your teacher rapes you, but you're a man, it's hot.
It's hot.
And George Lopez will high five you. But anyway, Shaolin Fantastic is the classic street hustler from all hip-hop archetypes, from every rap song you've ever heard. He is running dope in Fat Annie's disco club as the show starts. What's the name of the club?
Les Inferno.
Yes.
Les Inferno. All right, hold on. Sorry. I assumed one of them was just going to say the name of the club, and they both looked at me like, damn, it's hot in here.
Yeah.
So the central tension at the heart of The Get Down is between Zeke's infatuation with the new friendship with Shaolin Fantastic and his ongoing, ever-dying love.
Never dying.
Yeah, undying, maybe.
Yeah, there you go.
His undead love.
Zombie love.
For Mylene, the gorgeous and amazing
Preacher's daughter.
that he grew up with,
That he plays piano for.
who sings her own songs on the show and is
That's
going to
pretty
put
impressive.
out a disco album of her own in 2017.
She's waiting that long from 77?
Okay, Mylene is not going to put out a disco album. She put out a disco single at the climax of the first season. But the young lady who plays the character, whose name is totally unpronounceable to non-Hispanics, as far as I can see it written here. Again, in my own handwriting. Jerezan Guardiola. I don't know. I have no idea.
Yeah.
That's also the best white way to say a Spanish thing you don't know how to say.
Lots of breaths.
Just a lot of breath. But she sings her own songs, which is awesome for a musical.
That is actually legitimately amazing. She's got an amazing voice. I don't like her.
Believable. I have heard a lot of women say that they really don't like her.
So
I think you are too protective of Zeke's little heart.
No. I am not protective of Zeke's little heart. I am protective of the fragile feminism that is being able to get pushed through this largely male story because she's still a shrew. She is still trying to control Zeke and make him who she wants him to be, or who she thinks he should be, which is apparent that it's a pressure that is also coming from parents, like you would expect in a classic coming of age story, and the community to be a representative. And then once Zeke gets into the bigger world from other people just wanting to mold him into, but she is quite obviously, she has been the love of his life for many, many years, and he is infatuated with her for whatever reason. I'm not even trying to touch that. There doesn't have to be reason in infatuation.
Well, she's gorgeous.
Yeah.
Whatever. But they make it clear that mostly she's only interested in Zeke when he supports her.
I mean, it's hard to disagree with that.
And when he starts to support her, and when she starts feeling what seems to be like kind of a role of power, that he'll do this thing, he'll go for this internship, he'll do the thing, that's when she starts really turning on the sexual chemistry. And I'm not saying that their entire physical relationship is about manipulation, but there is a manipulative quality to it, and I don't like it. So many other characters have genuine moments and the characters are whole, and they're not stereotypes, and neither are their relationships, but that one is.
Well,
Why?
I think maybe even more than manipulative, it's hypocritical. Because for Zeke, when he looks at these two important people in his life, Shaolin and Mylene, Shaolin represents one path where he dives into this new world with the get down and starts creating an art form of his own that he's very excited about.
And he's also the coolest,
and he's the coolest,
sexiest guys he's ever seen. Shaolin Fantastic is presented as a sex object, as a superhero, as the platonic ideal of masculine everything. Totally. And Zeke is down for that, and he looks up to him because he's a little man without a father figure. He's got a fat boyfriend of his aunt back at home. His parents are dead, and he's looking for somebody to look up to.
Well, he's looking for someone to look up to that speaks a language he can understand. You know, he could, again, mold himself into somebody else's image. He could become a fat sexist contractor, or, whatever Jimmy Smits is. And
Papi Fuerte.
Papi Fuerte. Hardest working Latino actor, because he's all of them. But he is every Latino ever that Michael Peña isn't. That when he connects with Shaolin Fantastic, like, this is a person who is actually close to how he feels. Like, that's a genuine connection.
Yeah.
And it is platonic, it's fraternal, and it is almost erotic because of the energy that they create together.
Yeah, it's that young men together thing.
And that's what Shaolin represents. And Mylene, she represents, even though for herself she wants this superstar path of being a disco queen, for Zeke, she wants him to go to school, to take the internship. And in her mind, he's messing around with these other guys. And hip hop disco, in her mind, is an established art form that she can be successful in, where he's just, his art and his passion isn't going to get him anywhere. It's just fooling around with the boys from the block.
And I respect the conflict that sets up, because I do think that conflict is real. But when I say I don't like Mylene, it's because that is a classic sexist conflict.
I just realized, as Sam was laying that out, that I agree with Miranda, because what you just said is that Mylene is setting Zeke up as her fallback.
Yeah.
She's going to be famous, except for if she's not, her man went and got a business degree, so it's all good. He'll provide for her.
Exactly.
He doesn't have dreams and talents, even though she thinks that he is as talented as he is. That's their bond. But she's also like, I'm the star.
But she thinks he's talented within her boundaries, not within anyone else's. He plays piano for her.
Yeah.
He comes up with words for her.
And if you notice, the first poem that we're given in the very first episode to show Zeke's creativity at all is a poem about not how sexy Mylene is, but about her singing.
Yes.
They are turned on by each other's creativity. The whole poem is like, when you sing, it makes me
cry,
do
and it's
things
like
in
how velvet feels.
How velvet feels.
This is how velvet feels. Which, again, I'm not going to try to get into why they like each other because that's not my business. It's not the important part of the story. But
You're not going to violate their privacy.
I'm not going to try to get into it. But what I am going to comment to is that it is a story that they continue to tell. And it is a major part of his decision-making process. And the conflicts later between Shaolin and Mylene, between him and Shaolin, between him and the community leaders. And I just feel that it's really unfortunate that she has to be the one, that character, Mylene's character has to be the one to carry that, no, you get a job so you come home. So I can wear that dress and be the disco star that I was always meant to be. And I mean, if you want to call it feminism, then yes, she is making the masculine argument. I'm going to do the awesome thing and go to school, or do whatever my dream is, and you're going to stay at home and make sure that I'm okay about it. So yes, total flip. I still don't like her.
I guess I just saw it more as Mylene's naivete to think that for Zeke to stick around with these guys doing what they're doing, he's keeping himself indentured into this endless cycle.
Yeah.
And that if he wants to break a cycle, he needs to pursue an education.
Again,
But
she's
for
the
her to break
Reverend's
her
daughter,
cycle-
so
Yeah.
she's from a very different background, even though they live right down the street from each other and been in love with each other. We're not told, but it's the type of thing where they were
Yeah.
8 years old. It's a pre-sexual thing that they have. They used to be best friends,
They're
I'm
part of each
guessing.
other's worlds. Like
Absolutely.
they can't imagine.
I know the story.
She says
that-
we don't do that anymore.
Yeah,
in the
so
first
yeah,
episode.
so probably they first experimented with each other. It's the grown up together love story.
Yeah.
But at the same time that they are on the block together, they have very different backgrounds. Zeke's story is a broken home, or a just murdered home. His parents
Home
are
was murdered.
no home.
home.
And hers is one that's very settled. She's
She's
not very rebellious as other preachers' daughters that I have known have been, but she always knows that she can come home. Her
Yes.
parents are married. It's a stable environment from which she goes out into the streets.
She's always
whereas
got
Zeke
someone to
goes
call.
out into the streets because it's not comfortable at home as much as his aunt loves him.
Two things. One, when Mylene has her super bad conflict with her dad, she's got someone to call. Zeke doesn't. Zeke literally disappears into Shaolin Fantastic's apartment for how long? Like 4 days when they're trying to figure out the crayon and stuff. And no one says, "Where have you been?"
She loves him. His aunt loves him, but that doesn't necessarily mean that she can look after him.
Yeah.
I mean, she's dating that dude who's like a weird fat contractor who always either just got out of the shower or needs to take one. I'm not exactly sure what they're trying to represent
Constantly
there.
in his underwear. I don't know that he owns pants.
First of all, let me just say that our engineer, Jeremy, is right now in this hot Portland mid-September weather, the spitting image of the character that we're describing.
It's just as if that character ran out a little toner. You know?
But thankfully, he doesn't have a microphone in order to give us a speech about how to be a real man.
Oh, man.
So the other family that is involved in Mylene and Zeke's childhood and their friendship is a group of 3 brothers and a sister who are, again, Dizzy, Rara, Boo Boo, and Yolanda, and their wonderful parents who seem to be, they own the barbershop, and also he seems to be a jazz player of some kind. And
What's that? No.
They own a salon.
Salon.
They own a salon downstairs.
Very
En
different.
salon.
Barbershop and salon. They own the salon.
It's true. It's true. It's for
there's
the ladies.
distinction.
And I'm pretty sure that they are like going on tour to play music, she goes with him on tour. He's some sort of a jazz player.
Totally.
Oh, it's awesome episode where he's just playing and while they're at dinner.
Yeah.
They have a bunch of their friends over and she's just like
Yeah.
on the saxophone, and they're like,
So they represent this bohemian artistic black family in contrast to these families that were given of Mylene's, the preacher and his wife, as well as Zeke's strange home relationship. But this is where both of them go to dinner, and then they both go to their friend's bedroom, and they go to those bedrooms and they whisper about each other.
And it definitely seems like the safe house for
Yeah.
all of these children.
The cool
that we
parents.
care about.
The cool parents
Yeah.
where you can go kick it, and that's why they have such cool kids. Dizzy in particular, played by Jaden Smith, he's our graffiti writer of the different strands of hip hop that are sort of represented throughout the show. Dizzy, who writes as Rumi 411, played by Jaden Smith, is our little graffiti writer.
I don't even know where to start with him.
He's an artist.
He's an artist?
He's moved on to pop art recently.
he's reading an Andy Warhol book at the dinner
The philosophy
table.
of Andy Warhol.
When we're first introduced to that family scene, yeah.
He wears an amazing jacket made of patches of fur and leather and other ornamentation.
He's got like an alien patch on the back, and is, as you pointed out to me, on acid a whole lot of the time.
If
in
you
that
go
show.
back and watch, he mentions that he has just dropped his last tab of lysergic acid, 26, and that he can't put it in the special punch that they need for their get down that they're gonna throw, and they're like, not that punch, the one with the rum, and he's like, oh well, in that case, it's fine.
Well, I with just that one fact though, going back and rewatching a couple of the earlier episodes, there is a total distinction between Dizzy when he's tripping and when he's not. You
Yes.
can see him at the dinner table interacting with his parents and reading his literature and fully engaged. And there are times in the show when he's staring at the sun and reciting poetry and is this alien creature that I imagine is maybe actually not that different from what Jaden Smith is like in real life.
I love Jaden Smith because he tweets an amazing amount of positive affirmations daily, and every word, it's not in all caps, but every word of the tweet is capitalized. So it's as if it's like this long title, this long Posi-Core chapter title.
This piece is entitled.
Yeah. And Dizzy has this spirit about him. He's the character through which we go through a journey of queer sexuality. They don't quite push it all the way as far as you might hope when they introduce his sexy young boy suitor, Thor, who he writes as Thor.
saw that kid coming a mile away.
Oh my God,
Damn.
nobody's that pretty and straight.
Right?
That was the pretty, it was like, great.
I saw
Gay
those
kid,
eyes,
Dizzy's
lips, hair.
gonna
I'm like,
be experimental.
making
I'm
out. They're making out right now. She's making out right now.
Stoked.
I actually, I enjoyed Dizzy more in later episodes because he gets more time to be himself and to be comfortable. My favorite Dizzy moment was when the three brothers are cleaning up the salon after it's been messed up for reasons. And they're like, no, we can't let Shaolin and Zeke go up against this one conflict alone. We have to go and be there for it. And Dizzy, in perhaps a moment of clarity, or maybe the drugs just wore off, he's like, no, we got to stay here. Like, it's like, look, how can you be a rebel if you don't rebel? And he's like, that's true.
He thinks about it.
He does.
And he needs to put his actions in perspective with his rhetoric. He sees himself as a rebellious young artist. And even though he is the child of an obvious bohemian artist, he's like, well, this is a chance to do the thing that I say I do.
But with no angst. It's not a superhero moment.
No, it's a logical
for
decision.
Dizzy. He's just like, yeah, that's right.
And he puts the broom down and
he
walks
puts
out the
broom
door.
down. And I love that because this show and things that touch on these moments, these developing moments of artists' lives, they make such a big deal out of that moment when you choose to be a rebel versus following the thing. And Diz doesn't need that. He's just like, yeah, it's like 2 seconds on screen. And it's just like, yeah. And so when he goes to the loft party with all the drag queens and everything, like the buy-in, the willingness of that moment of him being introduced to this new culture is not out of character for him to just say, yeah, this is where I am right now. Mm-hmm. Okay.
And what a huge moment for me as Portland's premier drag enthusiast. I am a huge
I'm going to introduce
nerd.
you as that on every future episode.
Huge drag enthusiast. Love the club culture of New York. Obviously, a huge influence on drag as we know it now. And to anybody who is interested in that small scene and knowing more about the early 80s, at least, drag club kid culture should stop listening to this for a little bit and go watch Paris is Burning.
Paris is Burning
on Netflix because
Paris
it's
is
the
Burning.
most important documentary.
And that
you've
was
ever-
such an awesome scene in an episode about trying to get a record on the radio.
Yes.
Because
The
How do you
gays
get a
once
disco-
ruled the world?
because you're like, all right, how do I break into this thing? And the first thought is Pape Fuerte, like he can do anything. Okay, maybe this music producers can do anything. Okay.
Jimmy Smits calls Kevin Corrigan.
Yeah. And then what was his name? Jaquito.
Jackie Moreno.
Jaquito takes them to this, like, I don't know, DJ Black Market, where this one Jewish chick picks all the records that everyone's gonna love. And
She is that's the impetus.
style maker.
That's the impetus for the scene that I referenced earlier. The other moment of a man, not a young man at this point, of a man
Just a man.
being forced to submit to a sexual act
I mean, that is
as a power play. So Leslie Lestein, I'm just gonna say,
Goldstein, something.
sure.
Yeah.
She used to work for him, and then he banged her and fired her, and she is
Forgot her damn name.
particularly angry, apparently, about a blowjob that happened at one point, and she flips the script on him and forces him to perform oral sex, and then screams in his face that he's finished in this town. And it's such a crazy grand gesture, but it's also in a narrative of who are the tastemakers in this disco scene. Well, for some reason, this Leslie has an in with the DJs, and the DJs have an in with the queers who go to disco bars.
But
Is that what they called them?
Awesome
Disco bars?
disco areas. But the awesome thing about the party that Diz and Thor go to is that it has nothing to do with that crap except that a DJ goes to find records.
Yeah.
It's a completely separate culture. It's completely autonomous
Yeah,
with its
ve-
own
it's very
character.
private, actually.
Yes.
You need to be directly involved
Yes.
in that scene to be part
And
of
it's
the
so
drag
awesome that it's not dependent on any other part of the subculture that these kids are involved in and or creating.
Yeah.
This was already here.
Yeah.
These are people who have established their space. And Diz is just now seeing it, and he brings this record into it, which then blows up. But it's like this refreshing look. It's like, look, there's this whole world going on outside of whatever's happening in your neighborhood between your best friend and his girlfriend. Like, there's a bigger world, and that was so awesome. I loved that scene.
For a show that purports to be about the birth of hip hop, it seems to be very conscious of all of the forces that actually existed in the moment of hip hop's birth. Every account of hip hop needs to remember Puerto Ricans and disco, and that is those are two things that are represented heavily here. But I think what Miranda's pointing out is this amazing shift that occurs where they're giving us a cultural moment. They're not just talking about one musical genre that I happen to love and that's the reason why I'm watching the show. They're talking about that place and time. The whole show is framed with all these establishing shots that are from like newsreel footage, not even just the actual newscasters that they show, but also just they'll show real footage of the actual South Bronx during that era and then push in and then through some sort of CGI transition. It's like the show that we're watching now. And it really makes you...
It's effective. Yeah.
It works.
Yeah, it works. And I think to highlight something like the club kid culture, which, yes, it has an effect on disco, but didn't necessarily have a direct effect on hip hop. But they chose to include it because it was important to New York at the time. And it's hard. I mean, if obviously they don't want to just cover hip hop, they want to talk about music. And here is one platform that we're really going to highlight, one genre that we're really going to focus on. But what else was happening in the universe around it that could have affected it? Yeah, there probably was one kid, at least from the club scene, that was also working into the hip hop scene.
The way that they represent so many different subcultures happening in parallel, meaning not intersecting, it's just by happenstance that Dizzy happens to be into graffiti culture. That he is involved with some rapping and DJing at the Get Down.
Yeah.
That is not because graffiti writers hang out with DJs. It's just he knows a guy who knows a guy.
He's a social
And
butterfly.
reciprocally, that Zeke is able to make that speech, that rousing speech at the end, like basically
Incorporating
name
the-
checking all of these graffiti artists he knows and then connecting with the community. Like he just happens to know that he's not into it. He doesn't have the book. He doesn't go to the parties. He doesn't sit with Dizzy on the bench where all the other artists
The
are
writer's
writing.
bench.
The writer's bench.
It's a certain subway station. I wish I actually knew what it is. It's a real thing, and all the characters that are in those scenes with Dizzy are playing like real writers from the era. That's one of the parts that they get really right.
But that's not Zeke's, that's not his strength. That's not his interest, but it's part of his creative environment, as hip hop is part of Dizzy's creative environment. And now the club scene and the drag scene will be part of his further developing creative environment.
Is Dizzy going to become Basquiat in the fucking second half of the season?
Okay,
Man.
fingers crossed. Eventually, no. Like,
Or RuPaul.
shit.
They pull out a lot of tricks that you wouldn't necessarily have seen in the South Bronx in 1977. I want to say that one of them is Boo Boo's singing. Definitely one of them is Rah Rah's double time speed rapping.
Yeah, that seemed a little bit of the one trope, you know, the trope where just one person has a set of skills and it's like fucking like game changing. Like Rah Rah has been their sort of spiritual center. In the first episode, they're going to see Star Wars, okay? It's a very important moment culturally and for young people everywhere.
One more touchstone of the
Yes.
summer of 77. How did we miss that?
And throughout the rest of the episodes, Rah Rah will say, well, Obi-Wan says this, and the Force is that.
And Yoda.
And Yoda does this other thing. Well, Yoda's in... never mind. Sorry, distracted by the nerd. And so he sort of has this if we're gonna look in this like sort of Buddhist kind of Shaolin thing, you've got Grandmaster Flash, and you've got Shaolin Fantastic as his student, and then you have another sort of burgeoning spiritual guide of Ra-Ra, and you think maybe he's not going to be involved in the whole battle at the end. Maybe that's not his talent. Maybe that's not his role.
Because as they're practicing for their big performance,
He can't.
he has rhymes written for him and he stutters, and then suddenly someone suggests, what if you just rapped really, really fast?
Super fast.
And then he can just do it. So
that was a real white knuckle moment for me, because I thought this was going to be the point where we saw the rest of these kids having to leave somebody behind. And it wasn't. So that was great. But it was sort of up to that point, definitely. I think Ra-Ra has represented, like in a lot of superhero stories, which this is totally a superhero creation story at the same time as it is
Origins.
the telling of the creation of hip hop.
absolutely.
Like in all superhero stories, you have to have that one character that doesn't have the powers, that is us.
There are
That
always
is-
two, a student and a teacher, and those are two.
And their friend who buys beers.
Those are two genres that have grown up together, hip hop and superheroes, and the obsession with the origin story.
Yeah.
This is all one force that we're
that's
talking
our
about.
narrative. That's our entire narrative throughout this show is his origin story. Every episode
Who's
opens.
Zeke?
Is that what we're assuming the character at the beginning is? The one
That's-
on stage?
That's
Oh,
our
yeah,
that's our
that's-
protagonist.
Yeah.
Oh, sure. So
That's
we
his
sh-
origin story.
we should mention that the Get Down is framed by a very successful rapper on stage in an arena in 1996? Because it just is. It's that moment. I mean, they use Nas. So Nas is the voice of the grown-up books, is his MC name that he's given as the wordsmith of Shaolin Fantastic. I don't know if that's what name he ends up with on stage. Nas himself went through a whole bunch of silly iterations of his own name. Nasir is his name, is his birth name, Nasir Jones. And his first rap name was Nasty Nas, and then his first album was under Nas, and then he changed his name to Nas Escobar. And that was the moment in 1996. That would have been the moment where he had become Nas Escobar. That's that Puff Daddy moment of the champagne and Biggie Smalls and the club with the models and the limousines. So the idea that that is where the story is being told from, that's the peak. That's before any kind of reckoning or downfall for hip hop. That's the peak of it. It's at its excess moment. It's at its most ridiculous, but also at its most joyous and triumphant. The moment that Nas is rapping from at the beginning, and did they do it at the end of every episode? They definitely do it at the beginning of every
Yes.
episode.
And there's even in some crucial plot points, he, as a way to sort of be the narrator of the moment, he'll sort of like jump in this future dialogue and be like, that's when I knew, Shaolin, that we were going to have a future together or something. He sort of
His
sprinkled
voice is
throughout.
used as voiceover in addition to the actual rapping that you hear at the beginning of every episode. And he kind of authorizes this moment. Nas represents for hardcore hip hop fans this transition from the old school to everything that's happened after, which his famous first album, Illmatic, is this moment where it's either the end of classic rap or it's the beginning of contemporary rap. And now they're all like singing and stuff. So maybe there's
What
a
you
new
got against Drake?
maybe there's a new part of the story that I'm not as up on, but that was the way that the narrative went, at least when I was growing up, that he was this figure that represented that. So having him as part of the show is very important. And Grandmaster Flash is the name from the old school, and he's both an executive producer of the show and on screen as a character in the show. You hear Nas's voice in the show, but Grandmaster Flash is a very important character on the Get Down.
I'm going to be the outside person here. That's actually Grandmaster Flash?
No, that's
Okay.
the character
That
Grandmaster
is
Flash
okay.
played by a young man.
All right, great. Because I was like, that bitch
He's
is ageless.
aged very well. Yeah.
But I actually really enjoy his role there because in that character's way, he legitimizes everything the boys are trying to do. That he makes it, he doesn't make it about skill because it is about skill, but he gives the viewer a touchstone that is not a young man. He's not a person in conflict with his own identity. He's not having any of the problems anybody else is like, this is just what I do, and I am just amazing at it.
And he's a community leader.
And they all are.
Yeah.
Every major, all three, I imagine. We haven't met the third major DJ yet.
I'm not sure if they're going to do Africa Bambaataa, but they did say in a scene, Cool Herc, Grandmaster Flash, Africa Bambaataa, and then we met Cool Herc later on.
Yeah, so both Grandmaster Flash and Cool Herc deeply care about their community and what their music provides for the community. And that is a counterweight to the public-facing community leaders. Listen to my air quotes. Community leaders, that is Papa Fuerte and Mylena's father, in the church and stuff like that. It is a counterweight of Papa Fuerte is definitely working for his community, but possibly underhandedly, and would definitely
Both. It's both.
and would definitely
He's
cast-
corrupt and he loves his people. It's
absolutely.
They're both
and
true.
But he would definitely cast aspersions at Grandmaster Flash and Cool Herc if they were to be put on the same level as him as working for the community and both values for the community. But they do embody these two poles of how do you work for the community? Do you put something into it that is at this skin level music where people can go and feel these things and create this art, or on this government level, corrupt deals and making connections with politicians to get resources. Like, they're all trying to work for this community, but at the same time, they're working towards the sabotage of each other.
That's totally interesting you say that, yeah, because Papa Fuerte, in the first episode, we see him, I can't say it without a little bit of, sizzle. He takes one of these other corrupt politician handymans with him to a site where they're looking out at one of Shaolin's graffiti pieces. And he acknowledges, he's like, you get some art teachers in this community, and these will be in museums in 20 years. But he...
Clan of the Dragon Fist.
Immediately within like 3 episodes is put in a position to start pushing a message of anti-graffiti. And he's more than comfortable with doing it as long as he gets what he wants in the end.
Yeah.
So he's fine with his own hypocrisies, whereas these community leader DJs... they're actually trying to make change. They're...
Who also have their own hypocrisies of the drugs going throughout any, get down event.
We do not see Grandmaster Flash or Cool Herc selling drugs or condoning drugs of any kind.
Absolutely not.
Shaolin Fantastic brings some drugs that he got from Fat Annie from her disco club that he needs to sell or he's about to get clapped up. That's totally separate from the actual Get Down. And that's one of the things that the show is trying to sell you, which is totally valid and true. Those DJs that we're talking about, they were community leaders. And the whole point of what they were doing was to stop the insane gang violence that was happening at the time.
Let's create a safe place that is a distraction
I'm
for
not saying,
the violence.
yeah, and I am not
on.
saying they're synonymous. I am just saying that within the environment of the Get Down, they did have to deal with that influence.
Yeah.
And when Papa Fuerte... I'm sorry, my
pronunciation.
my tongue got away from me. When Papa Fuerte has to deal with the corruption, what he does is integrate it. I'll make this deal.
Yeah.
I'll make this deal, then the next deal will be good for me.
Yeah.
I'll make this deal, and the next good deal will be good for me. But what Grandmaster Flash says to Shaolin Fantastic is you have to clean yourself up and you have to focus on your music, because that's the most important thing that you bring here. Not your street game, not anything else, but that. And there's a line drawn. And in these two poles of community support, you see one side willing to make a deal and one side that must not compromise to maintain a genuineness of their art.
Shoot the Projectionist is recorded in Portland, Oregon by Jeremy Sandi. I'm Eddie Hardy. You can reach me at Shoot the Project on Twitter.
And I am Miranda Sandi. You can reach me at Knows the Word, also on Twitter.
And I am Sam Petersen, and you can stare into my eyes and judge my soul from most street corners.
Done and done.
Until next time, we'll leave you with this performance by Jonathan Beast and the Bathroom Floors.
You know the fish aren't flying anymore, and the boats keep resting on the ocean floor, and my trailer burned down in a forest fire as the smoke turned into spires. I pulled my pants up higher for the flood. Now we're the fossils in the mud.
Yeah.
Was that action?
Act.